Howdy, folks. Today we're heading to the land of fire and ice to uncover the truth about photographing Iceland. From towering waterfalls and endless highlands to standing face to face with active volcanic eruptions, today's guest has built an extraordinary photography career documenting one of the most dramatic landscapes on Earth. We're talking adventure, storytelling, drones, extreme conditions, and what it really takes to create compelling images in a place that millions dream of photographing. That's all coming up right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. We've spent literally hundreds of hours interviewing some of the most renowned photographers of our time, giving you access to knowledge and expertise that's simply not available anywhere else. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Nutz, and if you're like me and you enjoy free podcast and YouTube content, but you'd like to support what we do here at Camera Shake, you can buy us a coffee over at buymeacoffee.com/CameraShake. You should know by now how much I love a good cup of coffee. Your support helps us continue bringing you more great conversations with some of the most inspiring photographers in the world. Today's guest is a Belgian-born photographer who followed his passion all the way to Iceland, eventually becoming an Icelandic citizen and building a career around photographing the country's incredible landscapes, the wildlife, aerial perspective, and active volcanic eruptions. His work has been featured internationally. He's led photography workshops across Iceland, Greenland, and Antarctica, and he's become one of the most respected voices when it comes to photographing Iceland's unique and ever-changing environment. Please welcome to the Camera Shake, Jeroen Van Nieuwenhove. I hope I haven't butchered your name entirely.
Don't worry about that. As long as I know you're talking to me, that's all that matters.
Cool. Now, I mean, you've literally packed up your life and moved to Iceland entirely. Looking back, does that sound as crazy to you now as it does to the best of us?
I think it maybe looking back seems crazier when I look at my friends who have stayed home and didn't go and explore what's going on in the rest of the world. I think for me it's kind of gotten a lot more normal that I did this and feels a lot more natural that I did this than it did when I actually did it, if that makes sense.
What did it feel like when you first arrived in Iceland? I mean, I'm guessing you'd been to Iceland several times before you actually moved there.
Yep. Correct. Yeah. I mean, it was a little bit strange in the sense that, yeah, it's strange to kind of start over from scratch in a place that you know something about but don't really know that well. I mean, I knew Iceland really well, but I didn't know what it was like to live there. I didn't know what it was like to be a part of Icelandic society. And I think that over the years, that's been a little bit of a learning curve from compared to where I came from. But it wasn't as hard or it wasn't as strange as I thought it was going to be. Like, of course, you need to adjust a little bit, but yeah, I think in the end it just worked out quite easily.
So before Iceland ended your life, what was photography like for you, and how did that fit into your career at the time?
Yeah, so I started sort of pursuing semi-professional photography when I was still in Belgium, and I started out photographing parties and events and concerts in my local community. That's kind of how I rolled into it. And from a very young age, I had always been very interested in nature photography and just being out in nature as a whole. And that kind of got amplified when I went to Iceland for the first time in 2012. I took that same camera that I'd been using to photograph events. And then I started discovering that I really, really enjoyed being out in nature and photographing it. And that sort of became part of a journey as I moved to Iceland. So my professional photography career kind of grew as I moved to Iceland.
Do you remember that moment when Iceland first got under your skin?
Absolutely. It's really strange, but like I still remember that moment, and I still don't quite understand what happened, or like what happened to me at that moment. And what actually happened was I was on a 4-day hike through the highlands. That was literally the first thing that I did in Iceland. When I got here, we went straight to the highlands and started hiking. And I remember sitting on top of this mountain after like a very steep climb going up, and we sat down and we kind of looked over the landscape, and you could see, you know, steam coming out of the ground in some areas. You could see as far as you could possibly see, and there was nothing there. There were no people, there were no houses, there were no roads. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. I don't think I've ever experienced anything like that, where you're just literally in the middle of nowhere. And as far as you could see, there was nothing. And I think, I don't know, I felt some sort of kind of connection with the landscape, connection with being out in the wilderness. But it made me realize that, having this boring desk job in Belgium made me think about, is this what I wanted to keep doing in life? Is this what I wanted to kind of pursue? Is this what I was going to be doing the rest of my life? And it really got me thinking. And then after that, when I got home, it kind of, it made me homesick, but not homesick for being home. It made me homesick for being in what's now my new home, being out in nature and experiencing these moments. And I remember that moment very vividly, but I just can't really put into words what exactly changed at that time.
So at what point did like a photography trip become a life-changing decision?
Well, I think after I got home, I fairly quickly decided, okay, the year after that, I'm going to go back to Iceland. And then I traveled around Iceland with a couple of friends who went on a sort of road trip. And then after that, when I returned on that trip, I booked my next trip. And then before I went on that trip, I booked another trip, a very spontaneous weekend photographing the Northern Lights here in Iceland. And then I think it was like a year and a half later that someone said to me, why are you still here? Like, you're spending all of your holidays away from work. You're spending them in Iceland. So why do you stay here? Why don't you just go and be on a holiday all the time? Like, not actually being on a holiday, but it sort of made sense. Like, if I'm working just to spend all my money traveling to Iceland, then why wouldn't I just go there? And that really got me thinking. And then once I sort of made that decision of moving, then everything became really easy. I think that was probably the hardest part, where I decided I was going to do this. And then after that, it was a very calculated thing where I just realized, okay, I need this much time to leave my job. I need this much money. I need to sell this, and this. I need to wrap up everything with my apartment. And then I just left. It was as easy as that.
I was going to ask you that next, actually. When you look back, was it sort of a leap of faith or a calculated risk, basically?
Well, I mean, I guess it's a little bit both, because it was a leap of faith in the sense that, you don't know if this is going to work out. But I think the thing that really pushed me over the edge was by realizing what's the worst that could possibly happen. And the worst that could possibly happen is that things don't work out. I run out of money. I don't find a job. uh, don't fit into the society, or maybe realize that this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And the worst that could happen was that I would have to go back on a plane and go to Belgium, and then just find another job, and maybe even go work at the place that I left at. And that's something that once you realize that it's not really that difficult, and failure is not really that big of a disgrace, then it became really easy for me. Yeah.
It's one of these things, I think, that people don't necessarily realize, because I think, humans are change adverse, generally speaking, and, there's always a reason not to do something. Um, but what I
Yeah.
think, when you really think something through like that, you realize it's actually, in many ways, you know, it's like, what's the worst that can happen? Well, I have to go back. Okay, well, it's not like it's not the end of the
Yeah.
world. People ask me that a lot, because I moved here from Germany many, many years ago.
Hmm.
And right after high school, actually. And People over the years, people ask me that a lot. What's it like living away in a different country? And it's like, I always say, like, well, this is my home now, so I've lived here for 30 years. But also, it's really not as hard as you think it is. You know.
Yeah. I think like I found that over the years is that people sometimes they say to me, "Oh, I wish I could do that," or "I wish, I could move to a different country," or "I wish I could be in Iceland all the time." And then I usually reply and say, "Well, you could. It's really not that difficult. It's really not that big of a step. It's just in your head. Like you're mentioning, you keep finding reasons not to do this." And for me, that like once I realized that it was the easiest thing to do. And I think it's even more interesting that Belgium, or at least where I grew up in Flanders, people are very, we say that people have a brick in their stomach. Usually what they do is they grow up, and the thing that they do is they get married, and then they buy a house, or even better, they build a house, and it has to be within the community that they grew up in. And people never look what's beyond that. They kind of they're sort of content with that repetitive behavior that everybody's doing. Everybody's in this rat race, and they don't even go and peek behind the curtain to find out whether it's better somewhere else. And I'm very happy that I did that, but I'm still definitely within my community the odd duck out, 100%.
I think that's always going to be the case. I think this is how I feel. When I go back to see friends or my family in Germany, I always feel like the odd one out because I'm the one that has done the exact opposite to what everybody else has done. You know,
Yeah,
um, but then when they're living in the UK, I kind of feel the same thing for a number of reasons. One, I'm not British. That's one thing. That sticks out pretty much immediately. Um, but I'm also, I'm when I'm not hanging out with my creative friends, I'm always the odd creative guy, you know, who
yeah,
had to
yeah.
done things, based on a map, like you say, like you get married and you have kids and you buy a house and blah blah. Um, now coming back to Iceland, so social media has created a very specific image of Iceland, and that's actually true not only for Iceland but also for places like the Lofoten Islands, for example, in northern Norway, places like that. Um, And it's I'm thinking it's probably Instagram's fault, I don't know, but what's the reality that photographers discover when they actually arrive in a place like Iceland?
Well, it's a very interesting subject, and it's an interesting subject that I've thought about a lot as well. Is that Instagram and social media is kind of it's a place that reinforces certain kind of images. It has to be really impactful. It has to have a certain wow factor. And what you see is that people over the years, they kind of collect these kind of places, collect these kind of viewpoints, images, compositions that they really like, and that are very impactful, and that they see perform really well on social media. And I think exactly the two places you're naming there, Iceland and Lofoten, are places that have become sort of a victim of that, where people go there and they go there just to recreate these shots. And I find it incredibly interesting because, first of all, I don't function like that. This is just it's a foreign concept to me to kind of go somewhere and copy photos that someone else has made, um, especially when that's the only thing you do. And what I kind of find interesting is I like a good challenge, and I will go to places like that and I will try to photograph it from a completely different perspective. I'll try to find a new composition, and I'll try that again and again and again and do something different with it. Because to me, that's the challenge with photography, and especially living in a place that has been sort of photographed to death, if you look at it from a social media point of view. But in Iceland, the reality is that there's so many places to photograph, and there's so many places that have not been photographed, or are always photographed from the same angle, uh, from the same perspective, with the same camera, same lens. That I find it interesting to just do the opposite, and I think that's one of the reasons my work kind of stands out. And I think especially with the volcanic eruptions, that was sort of my driving my driving reason for photographing it is to show that you could do something different than just chase another viral shot. Yeah.
Has Iceland become a victim of its own photographic success to a degree?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more than photography. I think it's become a victim of social media in general. Because the thing that I see is that photographers, it's a very small group of people compared to the overall tourism industry in Iceland. Even though it may seem that because photographers are very present on social media, it may seem that they are a really large part. Actually, what we are seeing is that social media and have painted a certain paradise picture of Iceland, which is drawing in a lot of people who want to be in those places and want to be seen in those places and want to be photographed in those places. And I think, if anything, it's probably become a bit of a victim of that success, because now everywhere you go, there at least along the south coast, for example, at any given time of day, there will be hundreds of people there together with you. And what's really interesting is that on social media, you're kind of sold this idea of being alone everywhere, like being the first explorer of a certain area. But in reality, you're standing there with a lot of other people. And there, of course, there are so many places where there's still really no one, absolutely no one. And that's kind of the places that I spent most of my time at, is to really go where nobody goes. But as a tourist, you're probably going to find that this idea of solitude and being somewhere alone in front of a waterfall probably doesn't really exist anymore. And that's a thing that I think a lot of locals struggle with sometimes when they travel along the south coast, is that you travel and you don't hear Icelandic anymore. You only hear English. And I've had this really funny situations where I'm guiding a photo workshop, and I go and wash the car in the evening, and I'm standing at a car wash next to an Icelander, and he starts speaking to me in English, and I can hear he's Icelandic, and I start speaking Icelandic to him, and he is like, "Oh, finally, someone who's local, someone who's not the tourist." And yeah, it's really peculiar, because Iceland it thrives because of tourism. But on the other hand, in many places, you kind of don't feel like you're in Iceland anymore, because there are so many tourists. Because the Icelandic population is very little in comparison. Yeah.
I mean, one of the first times I've experienced exactly that was actually in Egypt, when I went to see the pyramids of Giza.
Yeah.
Because it's the reality is, I mean, what you see on postcards and on TV is not what it's really like. Because you just
No.
have to turn around 180 degrees, and there's like Burger King and McDonald's and all the rest of it. And you go, what happened
Okay.
here? That to me was actually uh, uh, I was really shocked by it to a degree. Shocked by the what's the word? Like how tourism can sometimes take you for a fool in a sense,
Yeah.
and so I can imagine, and I've heard this about Iceland several times, that you're kind of queuing to take a picture of a waterfall, which appears to be in total solitude.
Yeah.
Which Icelandic location do you think is like totally overrated, by the way?
Oh, I mean, I think probably there is a waterfall on the south coast. It's called Seljalandsfoss. It's a waterfall you can walk behind, and it's really beautiful. But I think it's become a victim of tourism in the sense that it doesn't feel like nature anymore. There's a big walkways going up to it, and then you have staircases to go around it. And it's basically, in the summer, if you're there at a busy moment, you just see people kind of queuing almost from the parking lot behind the waterfall and then back onto the bus. It's like like almost like working in a factory. And I think, to me, that's probably one of the most overrated locations, because I know there are so many more beautiful locations that are very similar, where you can walk behind a waterfall and you'll be there, and there's maybe maximum 10 other people there at a busy moment. So yeah, but it's easily accessible. So for many people, it's an obvious stop to make.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. It's one of these double-sided swords, though, I think. On one hand, it's good for the economy, for the local economy, to get tourism in. And I know this from Lofoten. But on the other hand, it is all of the change that it brings with it, in a sense, ruining some of the nature and the environmental impact and the impact that tourism naturally has, especially when it explodes like that.
Yeah, I think on social media plays a huge part in that, and over the last years, I feel like that has become increasingly a bigger problem. And one of the things I see in that is that, for example, a lot of influencers or social media personalities in recent years have started selling maps. That, for Iceland, for example, you could buy a $20 map that has 500 different locations marked on it. And the problem is that it's almost like information has gotten too easy to access. So if someone puts a very secluded place on a map like that and sells it to thousands of people within the span of a year, and that's something that we have seen a lot here already, is that this secluded spot no longer becomes secluded, cannot handle the amount of tourism that goes to it, and gets completely destroyed. So we have a lot of hot springs, for example, that used to be only known by locals, and the water in those hot springs doesn't always flow a lot. So it can handle a couple of people every day. But when 50, 60, 70 people go there every single day and bathe in the same water, the whole thing becomes sort of a cesspool for bacteria. And you have many places like that around Iceland that sort of get ruined because they've become successful and because it's become more easy to find them and access them. And in a way, it's a difficult discussion, because I find that everyone can just go, nature is free to access. Everybody should be able to enjoy access, but information like that shouldn't be free and shouldn't be free to anyone or shouldn't be known to anyone, because the reality is that we're just too many people. And if too many people know about something, it will get ruined and then nobody gets to enjoy it. So it's a very fine line to tread, and social media has played a huge part in that, and especially making it easier for people to sell maps and locations to people who have no clue how to behave in nature and respect it. I think that has become a really big problem.
Now, how did you go from photographing Iceland itself to becoming known for photographing volcanic eruptions? Like, what was that? How did that happen?
Yeah, so I've always been super interested in volcanoes, and so when the 2014-15 eruption, which lasted about almost 6 months, I think, happened in Iceland, I traveled to Iceland. This was before I moved. Traveled to Iceland twice to come and see it, and twice the weather was too awful to fly over it, so I didn't get to see it. So that meant that when in 2021, the first eruption, now the first one out of 12, started, I was so determined to go there and photograph it. And I basically, I walked there on foot because I got really frustrated about the fact that I had been on a wait list with a helicopter company for a very long time. And then when I reached out to them when the eruption finally started, it turned out that the first couple of flights, they were full of people who had a very big social media presence to kind of sell a good opportunity to promote their helicopter company, which I totally understand. But for me, that was like, okay, well, if that's not going to happen, then I'm just going to walk there. And I just walked through the lava field. And then when I got there, I sort of ran down a mental checklist of images that I really wanted to get from an eruption. And when I got home, I realized, this is in 2021. This was in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And that meant that the only people that could be there were locals. And I had a friend who worked for a Belgian national newspaper. So I decided to send him a line and say, like, look, these are the images I took. Probably nobody else has them because everybody here are locals. They're Icelanders or locals like me who moved here. And then they got published in the paper. And then I started going again and again and again and photographing it from every possible angle, actually being really frustrated by people who went to the eruption and tried to replicate that kind of viral shot that they saw someone else make. And I decided I'm going to do it completely different. And I spent so much time on the mountain photographing this eruption that I had a huge collection of images. And I got a lot of attention for it. So I photographed the northern lights above the eruption, active eruption, for example. That's an image that went around the world at the time, and then eventually produced a book. And as I was doing this and trying to show people how beautiful it was, and my social following started to grow tremendously. So I sort of, like a lot of awful things happened during the pandemic, but for me that was actually quite a nice time because it was almost my time to shine with my photography.
What was it like the first time you stood in front of an active volcano? Like,
Yeah,
what does that feel like?
it's indescribable. It's I remember, so I walked there and I probably took the most difficult route to hike there. Went over a mountain, and then when I was on top of the mountain, I could see these little cones erupting down at the bottom. And I sat down for about 5 minutes just staring at it, because this was like I couldn't quite process that finally I was going to be able to see this. And it was just unbelievable. I think the thing that struck me most of all was how fast things were changing. Like, as a landscape and nature photographer, you're always photographing something that's sort of static. You go to a landscape that doesn't move, a waterfall, the water moves, but the way the waterfall looks doesn't really change. And then you're standing there and literally in front of you, the landscape is changing. And that was a really weird thing to realize, that you're looking at something that's being created in front of you. Um, and that really had a huge impact on me, and also how I photographed it, because I felt that like every time I went there, I was able to take unique photos because nobody after me saw that moment that I captured, and nobody before me saw that moment that I captured. And that's probably why I spent so much time on the mountain, is I wanted to see this kind of change. That's probably the biggest takeaway I had from that eruption, is that when I went there, I it started in a valley. So you're in the bottom of the valley and there's these two little cones erupting. And now if you go there, this valley doesn't exist anymore. There is a mountain on top of it. So this valley completely vanished. And I think that left the biggest impact on me. And it's an indescribable feeling to stand there. Like, you're so mind blown by seeing the lava move, and you realize this is molten rock. But then once you realize how that's transforming the area, that's sort of a, yeah, like, without it being too cliche, I think it's like for me, that was so life changing that I almost thought, like, what are we, what are we worrying about all the time? Like, we're so much nothing as people, as humans, when you see that happen. Yeah, it had a really profound impact on me and my work. Yeah.
What does it actually feel like when you're close to flowing lava?
Yeah. Well, it's very hot. That's one thing. Uh,
Yeah, but
it's Yeah, you need to be. I mean, you need to be a bit careful about where you stand because if the wind is coming at you, that could be quite dangerous. But it's really interesting. Like you see this stuff move like it's water, but then as it moves and it starts to slow down, it starts to solidify. So you're looking at something that's moving, and at the same time, it's turning back into solid rock in front of you. And it's just, yeah, it's not normal. Like it almost doesn't feel normal that you can go and experience something like that.
That's the first time I saw the Northern Lights. That's exactly the kind of
Yeah.
experience I had. I thought like this, like because if you've never seen the Northern Lights, and I mean, you've seen them many times, but for me, maybe 3 years ago or something, I saw them for the first time, and
Mhm.
it was literally life changing because my brain literally couldn't quite compute what I was looking at.
Yeah.
My artistic brain thought that's CGI. Like, that's no
Yeah.
way that's
Yeah. Yeah.
real. And then my logical brain went, "Whoa, hang on a minute, you're not in a movie theater though." You're actually looking
Yeah.
at the sky. And it was one of these things, that I found it very difficult to describe. I tried to describe it to my wife, and it really, I don't know, I couldn't really put into words what that experience was like because it was so outside of anything I'd ever experienced.
Yeah.
It's just like,
I think seeing the northern lights, if you see them really well, like when they're really active, this is something that no photo, no video can ever really translate well, because it's everywhere. You see it, you see it moving above your head, and it's like
yeah.
a 360-degree experience, kind of. And it's sort of the same with volcanoes. You stand there, you smell it, you feel the heat, you
Mhm.
hear it like crackle like it's glass. And that's what's makes this really difficult. Like I try to make really compelling images, but nothing is going to compare to standing there and smelling it and seeing it and feeling it. It's just, yeah, it's too much to, yeah, try to condense into a single frame.
It's also, considering more dangerous than looking at the Northern Lights, for example. What's the sort of most dangerous situation you found yourself in whilst you're like photographing an eruption?
Yeah, I mean, for me, anyone that knows me knows that safety is my number one concern all the time. And definitely with eruptions, you never know what's going to happen. Even though it looks really stable, you never know what's going to happen. And I always try to, like, that's sort of my first assessment that I make when I'm on site, is like, where can I stand? Where can I be? And of course, sometimes it happens that you kind of, I wouldn't say miscalculate, but there's something changes in the eruption that makes you wonder, are we in the right place? I think probably the most dangerous I've had was, this was during the first eruption. At one point, there was quite a large earthquake that occurred during the eruption. And we were standing there. And at that point, I think immediately in my brain, I just go like, take my bag and I just start running. I don't even want to know what's going on, but I just start running because you're standing close to something. You don't know what, I know what could be happening. So I understand enough of it to know that, oh, maybe something is breaking underneath. Maybe the ground will split open next to it, which has happened on numerous occasions during these eruptions. So it's, for me, it's all about prevention, and not being in these kind of situations. But sometimes something happens, and then you just have to understand that you need to get out of there as soon as possible.
Have you ever been at a point where you just thought, well, this shot just isn't worth it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Like, I'm probably the guy that stands next to an eruption, and I'll see someone else do something, and I'll stand there and be like, nope. And that is not, no photo in the world could possibly be worth standing there. Like we saw people walking on top of the fresh lava.
Mm.
See that all the time. It's incredibly dangerous. You don't know how thick it is. You could just fall through, and then, yeah, then get stuck in it. But yeah, many times I see something cool happening, and then I think, yeah, maybe I could have gone a bit closer, but is that worth it? No, probably not. best story is the one that you can share with people afterwards.
Yeah.
That's sort of the reality.
Do these sort of accidents happen?
So far, nothing has happened, and I am quite amazed at it because I have seen people do incredibly dumb things. I remember last summer, I think it was, there was a guy who was standing on the edge of the cone, which is, I don't know what goes on in people's mind when they think that's okay. I've seen people push strollers with a lava flow. You see all kinds of craziness, and yeah, I'm surprised nothing has happened. I think the only thing that I'm aware of is that someone hiked to the volcano and then got a heart attack probably because of all the effort needed to get there. I think it was like a 12-kilometer hike one way. But other than that, nothing. But it's bound to happen at some point with all the tourism here. So
Yeah. What's the biggest technical challenge when you're photographing volcanoes, like in terms of, just pure from a technical uh, photography perspective?
I would say dynamic range, dealing with that because lava emits light, and I think the most beautiful moment is actually when it's sort of blue hour, so you still see somewhat of the surroundings, and then you have the lava glowing up. But once it starts to get dark, the contrast is so high that it almost becomes impossible to photograph. And that is quite tricky, getting those colors right and getting the lighting right in camera, because you couldn't always solve that with bracketing because of the fact that everything's moving.
Yeah.
That makes it really challenging. So yeah, that's something that I'm thinking a lot about when I'm shooting.
How much preparation goes into photographing an eruption, you know, versus simply reacting to what's unfolding?
I think sort of in general with my photography, I don't prepare all that much. Like I will do a lot of scouting locations and keeping an eye on the weather and stuff like that. But when I'm on location, I always sort of wing it and see what's going to happen and try to stay flexible to what's unfolding in front of me. And with the eruptions, I think that's probably the most important thing you should be doing. I usually, for example, during the last eruption, I kind of just park up and then I start flying my drone, and I fly up and down and up and down and up and down. And I just kind of look at it from all possible angles, because to me, this is then new from a day before because everything has changed during a night. And then I probably spend one or two batteries trying to find something that's interesting. And then once I get a good grasp of it, then I start shooting. And I think in general, that's kind of what I do with my photography. I never step out of a car, hike somewhere, and then start shooting right away. I usually walk around and then start looking around. So you kind of get a grasp, a sense of the situation of the place you're shooting, because observation is probably the most important thing you could be doing as a photographer. Look outside of the camera and then use the camera, not the other way around.
Is it difficult, or does it have an impact on a drone? I'm just thinking because you're flying around a volcano. Does heat rising? Does it have an impact on flying the drone at all?
Absolutely. So, especially here in Iceland, where you have the hot air generated by the lava, it's heating up the air, but then you also have really cold air, so you can get really strong convection winds. And there can be situations where suddenly the drone just starts lifting up on its own, or it's being pushed down on its own. And that's something to be very careful with, to always keep an eye on it. I've had situations, I remember last summer, I was flying my Mavic 4 Pro and suddenly it just arose to 160 meters without me doing anything, because it's just the wind kind of taking it up. And yeah, there's always situations like that. You need to be, very cautious and have a good understanding of what could be happening. So one of the things that I love doing is I love photographing eruptions when it's really windy, because the windier it gets, the more the heat kind of gets pushed away. And when that happens, you can go way lower, you can go way closer without actually risking anything. But then you also have less problems with those convection winds, And it's really interesting because most people, when it's really windy, they would say, no, I'm not going to fly my drone. But it's probably the best time to fly it.
What's your sort of favorite image that you're proud of the most?
Oh, there's so many. Uh, I've photographed so much already. Well, I think like probably the first one that I was really proud of is the Northern Lights above the eruption. That was just yeah, like it's such a unique phenomenon that I was so happy that I was able to photograph it, but probably even happier that I was able to see that with my own eyes. That I'm one of those people who can say that they've seen that happen, because very few people have been able to. Then there's also another one of my favorites is a top-down photo of a lava field. So it's completely black, but every now and then, because of the pressure, lava kind of seeps out in the top. And I managed to capture sort of the image of a dragon in a flow that came out of the lava field, which I really like. I think it's probably something that's very distinctly me, or very distinctly my style of images that I try to do at the eruption. I try to show like details that not many people have been able to shoot before. And then a third one probably is the eruption that I photographed in July last year. And what happened then was I went there on a kind of dreary day. It was very muddy. And I hiked there, and I was, making some video footage. And then on my last battery, it started to, yeah, the rain became really intense. It was absolutely torrential rain. And I was still out with my drone near the crater, and I saw everybody pack up. And as I was still flying there, I saw that all the rain, it was so intense that the lava field started steaming up unbelievably. And I managed to capture this beautiful, beautiful video and beautiful photos of the eruption that's kind of sitting in a steam cloud, which is, yeah, I don't know anyone who has a photo like that. And I'm very, very proud of that as well. Very proud that I persisted through the rain and managed to get that shot.
How do you move, like in a situation like that, you literally have like, moving lava and stuff. How do you move past just documenting what's going on to creating art?
Yeah, I try to, I think, for me, it's all, even documenting, it's always about intention. I try to put a lot of intention in my images. I try to be very um, thoughtful about how I position things in the frame. And when something like that happens, it's sort of like I have this conflict within with myself, where I'm like, I could just take a photo right now and then I have something, but that's not what I want. I want the creator to be there on the image. I want the flow to go that way. I want to wait for the clouds to, or like the steam clouds to be exactly at a right position around the creator. And probably more often than not, I've lost shots in situations like that because I'm so focused on how I want things to be positioned. And yeah, I think, yeah, sometimes for me, it's more important to make a compelling shot than just making a shot. I think that's sort of what it's about.
Oh, that's actually a good point. As somebody who really doesn't have a lot of experience shooting landscapes, or like I always say of myself that I'm really probably the worst landscape photographer on the planet, which is probably not true. My dog could be worse.
Iceland there just selected the worst photographer. So
What is it that so separates a good landscape photograph from like a truly memorable one? What is the difference?
I think I mean, I think it's multifaceted. Like one is that you need to capture a really special moment, I think. And special moments can come in all sizes. It can be a volcano. It could be as small as a bird that's beautiful, or like beautifully positioned on a tree or something. It doesn't have to be super spectacular. It just has to show something that's out of the ordinary. And aside from that, I think that's the thing in photography that most people seem to forget these days, is that it's about the experience. It's about capturing a moment that brings back this memory of standing there and seeing that. And I think that's why landscape and nature photography can be incredibly personal, because for me, I can show you this photo of the eruption in the steam cloud, and maybe you'll think, huh, that's cool, and that's it. But when I look at it, it takes me back to that moment where I stand in the rain, I stand in the mud, I'm completely soaked, and I'm shaking with my hands because I'm capturing this incredible footage. And that's what I think about. And I think that's sort of, yeah, what makes it a very um, important photo, or a very compelling photo, is when it can evoke that kind of emotion. When you can sort of translate that memory that I had to other people who look at it. I think that's probably the most difficult one, and that's what makes a special photo special to me.
Um, for photographers who visit famous landmarks, like you mentioned,
Hmm.
a waterfall, and I can't pronounce. I've tried to pronounce Icelandic names. There's just no chance in hell I could do that. I
Yeah.
even have a problem pronouncing Welsh names. Um, but for people who go to well-known places like that, how do you avoid creating the same photograph like everybody else?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really easy in the sense that you only have to look where everybody's going and then step in the opposite direction. And I think that's sort of, I'm not saying you shouldn't take that photo. Like, if you're in a beautiful place and you want to take that bucket list shot, by all means, go ahead and do it. It's not like it's forbidden, but I think what I want to say is that people need to step away from just doing that and look around and give yourself the time. And to me, that's what I notice, is that a lot of people don't seem to be doing when they travel around Iceland, is they don't give themselves time. And the way I get my images is I don't spend 10 minutes at the waterfall. I spend 3 hours at the waterfall. Then I walk around and look at it and observe and see what's happening. And then I'll start photographing. And you can also, for example, there is in the west, there is a very famous mountain. It's called Kirkjufell. It's like a cone-shaped mountain, very, very famous mountain. And in a location like that, what I do is I'll walk in the opposite direction. I'll walk up the mountain, follow a little stream, and then try to find ways to photograph it, not at that iconic viewpoint. And of course, these iconic viewpoints are iconic for a reason. They are really great shots, but if you want to stand out and you want to do things differently, you need to walk away from where everybody's going. That's essentially the trick to it.
If you had or if anybody, came to Iceland and had a week, right? What are the things they should stop photographing, and what are the things they should start photographing in order to create some really unique images?
Yeah, I think very important is try to pick your locations wisely based on the weather.
Right.
And what I do is I tend to go out shooting when the weather is not great for most people, because to me, these landscapes shine with a mood. They shine with low clouds, they shine with rain, they shine with fog, and I think that's exactly when you should be shooting. And try to, if you have a week, try to pick those moments. Try to, if you see that it's going to be a blue sky day, then maybe you wait until late in the evening and then start shooting. Don't feel like you need to be shooting 24/7, but look a lot at the weather and then decide when the perfect time is, or
That's actually
use that
very
time, to
yeah.
prepare a little bit.
That's very reminiscent of street photography, because it's one of the things I hear a lot. In London, like I live literally on the outskirts of London. People go like, "Oh no, the weather's terrible. It's raining. I can't go into that. I don't want to go into town and do street photography." Whilst I'm thinking, well, that's perfect. That's actually the
Yeah.
perfect time to go, because you might be able to create images that nobody else creates, because everybody else thinking, well, I'm going to stay inside because it's raining.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've learned over time, and again, I found not the greatest street photographer on the planet. I like it as a almost like a hobby. Um, is is that when you get to know a place, like your city or something, you sort of you realize that the same city can look very, very different depending on the weather or the time of year,
Yeah.
you know? And I've sort of learned that there are places that photograph really well when it's bright sunshine, and there are places that photograph really well when it's raining. It's just
Yeah.
knowing the place well enough so that you can make those decisions depending on the weather. Because, over here, well, the weather can change on a dime. It's like, as I always say, you wake up in the morning, it's bright sunshine, you use the bathroom, you come out and it's raining. That's just that's just how it rolls over here.
That's sort of how it goes here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned drones earlier. That's actually it's a really interesting aspect I was going to ask you about. Um,
Mhm.
how has drone photography changed the way you tell stories in or about Iceland?
Yeah, for me, it has changed everything because one of the things that I started realizing a couple of years ago is that, a drone is something really incredible because it's literally you have your camera on a tripod, and instead of walking in a 2D plane, you can put that tripod anywhere in a 3D environment. And for me, that sort of has reinvigorated my love for places that I sort of fell out of love with because I didn't feel like there were many places, For example, these waterfalls on the south coast, they kind of became boring because I didn't really see any more angles to it. But with the drone, you can find new angles, you can find new ways to shoot them, and you can find different, different style of images to make. And that's something that, yeah, now that I've sort of unlocked that vision of how to use a drone in situations like that, I feel like taking images that I've never even thought of creating because I'm constantly exploring with it, trying to find foregrounds for incredible locations that nobody else has thought about because they can't actually get there. They can't actually see it with their own eyes. And yeah, that's been an absolute game changer.
What are the sort of drone laws like in Iceland? I mean, can anybody just rock up with a drone and fly it, or is there like do you need permission? So how does it work
Well,
over there?
yeah, in Iceland, we have the European regulations, or we've adopted the European regulations, which are very similar to the ones in UK, I think, these days. And then we have certain areas where you need special permits as well. It's quite. I wish they would make these things more simple. There's not really one source of information here in Iceland, except my own website. Bizarrely enough, I did a whole article about it because I felt like there needed to be a one source of information. So I just created that, and yeah, it can be quite complicated when you start looking into what permits you need in what areas. But outside of that, it's just as simple as just having your European license.
Okay, so I guess you need to be registered, and you have to register the drone. I think it's changed a couple of years ago. So I used to fly a drone maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I
Mhm.
think there was some change
Yep.
in the regulation.
Yeah. Now you need a specific type of license if your drone weighs more than 250 grams. Yeah.
Right.
In a nutshell.
Yeah. Um, do you think drones have made landscape photography more creative or more repetitive generally?
Well, I guess it depends on what your intention is, right? Like to me, it has made landscape photography a lot more creative because now it unlocked areas that were previously never accessible. It has even unlocked photography for people who have never been able to access certain areas because of physical abilities, for example, or it has allowed you to look at places in a way that was absolutely impossible before. Like one of the things that I like, for example, about the Icelandic Highlands is that um, there are photos that you can take there with a drone that are impossible to take from the ground because you don't have any place that has the elevation needed to see it like that. You can photograph, rivers in really unique ways. You can find interesting shapes and patterns on the ground that you couldn't possibly see from anywhere near it. So to me, it has kind of creativity in that regard has exploded, because now, yeah, your imagination is sort of the limit of what you can do with it. But of course, uh, going back to the social media conversation, this has also caused that some people, again, travel to copy what they've seen, they liked on social media, or maybe they've seen certain images that perform really well on social media and then try to copy that. So I guess it's probably more up to your own kind of view. But to me, they've sort of opened the floodgates in terms of creativity.
Yeah, I mean, drone photography is really interesting because I love the abstract element to it,
Hmm.
because it's sometimes you don't like your first sort of response is you don't really know what you're looking at. And then it's about
Yeah.
discovering what's going on in the image. That's the beautiful thing that's the beauty about photography is, you can, when you get to discover things in the frame, and this is the thing that I think, especially when drone photography first became a thing, I love that, you try to actually work out what's going on. What's a lot of images nowadays, you just because you've seen them a million times, especially on social media, you just know instantaneously what it is. Whether it's Lake Louise or whether it's whatever, you know,
Yeah.
because you've seen it so many times. But with drone photography, as you say, it's just the ability to create angles where you really have to. Which is why, by the way, I love the screensavers on Apple TV. Anybody listening or
Yeah.
watching
Yeah.
this, if you have Apple TV, it's like I could watch them forever. You know, super slow mo drone photography, and it flies over some city even, and you go, I want to work out what that city is.
Yeah, yeah, it's quite interesting because there are quite a lot of screensavers recorded here in Iceland,
Mm.
and there's one that goes along a really long lake, and I've actually watched that whole video just because I wanted to kind of figure out where the hiking trails were going in that area, so I could
Yeah,
kind of find out certain locations to shoot. But yeah, it's really, it's also a really good example of how observation is so important, because it's slow motion and because it goes really slow through these areas, you have kind of time to observe what's going on.
yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I love those screensavers.
Yeah, it's also like, especially when the landscape's very different. I mean, there's one screensaver, I think it's filmed in the Sierra Nevada, which is northern California, and
Yep.
it's a landscape that you've never seen before because it's filmed at a time when there's a lot of like blossoms are coming out, and you go, I wonder why that is. That seems very bizarre, and you go, oh, Sierra Nevada. Oh, really? I didn't think. In my mind, I never
Yeah.
imagined that landscape to look like that. That's kind of interesting. The other thing I like is there's a very simple shot that scans along the beach and I believe it's Malibu Beach, if I'm not mistaken. But basically, you can see because it's so super slow mo, you can see people moving very slowly, and there's people in the water and people on the beach. And of course, they're just tiny little dots. But what I find really interesting is to watch their sort of behavioral patterns. You know, because they're like ants essentially. Yet
Yeah.
they're people. So it's almost yeah. For me, it's almost like a trance like sort of thing. I think it's
Yeah.
something. My wife loves watching those. My daughter loves watching those. It's like sometimes we just, I wouldn't say we spend all evening just watching screensavers, but comparatively, relatively long time.
Yeah, I know the feeling. We have the the TV running those screensavers all on quite a lot here as well.
Yeah. Um. So, what's your approach really to when talking about drone photography? What's your approach to creating aerial images that sort of feel intentional, rather than just high up? Because I think when people get into drone photography, it's you can fall into this trap of like going, "Oh, I'm just gonna take a picture from really high up, and that's it." How do you make that intentional?
Well, I think one of the ways that I do that is I work with panoramas all the time. So I don't just take single shots. I will always make some kind of vertical panorama, horizontal panorama, because that gives you the flexibility to kind of highlight certain things. So for example, one example that comes to mind is I'll fly above a crater and I'll be really low above the crater, and then the bottom two images of the vertical panorama will be almost only the crater, and then the top one, the rest of the landscape. And what you get then is then the foreground, which is the crater, kind of almost hits you in the face because it takes up half of the final image. And that's sort of what I try to do is I'll try to find lines, I'll try to find things that I can use as a foreground, whether it's the edge of a mountain or a river or something like that, to kind of really draw you in and add depth into the image. Because just as you say, it already has a bit of a wow factor if you just fly the drone and look down on a landscape. But I think especially because you have the ability to be anywhere in a 3D space, you need to be thinking about, how you place elements, because you can very easily, it's almost like you're flying a geared tripod head. You can make very small adjustments, going a little bit higher, going a little bit lower, left or right. So you can almost create a perfectly composed image because you have that flexibility. So I'm almost harder on myself when I'm composing because of that flexibility than I would be with a camera, just because you can create more intention.
This I can't remember the company. So Insta360 has teamed up with a drone company. What are they called? I can't remember. I met them over at NAB. And it's a 360 drone, like
Yep,
8K. What are they called?
it's anti-gravity.
Anti-gravity. That's exactly
Yeah.
it. Yeah. And I had a chance to. They had like a little space where you could test them. With a
Mm-hmm.
headset, and it's like like a cage thing almost. You can fly them. It's quite impressive. Although I feel dizzy when I look through like a headset. D Is that something that interests you to create like 360 panoramas
Well,
or something like that?
I have used that drone. I actually wrote a review on it, and then I've also used the DJI Avata 360.
Mhm.
And I find that the experience of having the headset on, it very much feels like you're flying. It's really cool to do it. But photography wise and for filming, I think it's very limited, because with the headset on, you almost don't have any real idea of where you're going and what you're doing. It's much harder to put intention into your footage. And with the Avata, for example, you're flying with a regular remote, and that makes it much easier to kind of frame everything up really well, and then afterwards you add all the cool effects and add all the motion to it. And it's something I like playing around with, but at the moment it feels more like I don't know, it's like it's fun to do but not creatively interesting, because it's almost like it's too abstract. Like you're filming something, you're filming everything at the same time, and then afterwards you kind of have to figure out what you're going to do with it. While if you fly a drone, you can put a lot of attention in how you frame stuff up, and then what you see on the screen is what you're going to get. But with the 360 drone, you don't really get that kind of feedback, so that makes it, in a sense, a lot harder.
I tell you what was interesting. I had the opportunity to try out Canon's stereoscopic lenses,
Yeah, yeah.
and they basically they do this this environmental project. They're involved in this environmental project where they basically film 3D footage of reefs. And
Mhm.
so they're underwater, and I've built this underwater system for the camera with the stereoscopic lenses. And when I tried that out, I believe it was at the photography show in Birmingham a couple of months ago. It's a really interesting experience to virtually fly underwater, over the top
Yeah,
of the sea reefs, and then being able in 3-dimensional space to move around and look around is just it's a bizarre experience. But if it's exactly like you say, it feels like you're flying.
yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. Like it feels like you can sort of draw people more into the moment, in a way that you could never do with a regular video.
The interesting thing about that Canon project was that it's meant to highlight the environmental impact on coral reefs, and of course, we read about it, we see pictures about it, we watch documentaries about it, and whatever. But that experience was really, it was like something completely different because you're in there. You're just literally, I mean, it looks like or feels like you're flying over them, and you can see the impact immediately. The dying coral, and the environmental problems that come with it. Um, and it really, I walked away from that thing. It was much more present in my mind, you know, um, than it would have been if I had just watched a regular documentary about it. I think there's so much potential for that kind of technology, to really make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's almost like if they could make that and then also give you like some kind of feedback on scent and maybe like really immersive audio, that could be very interesting for these kind of applications.
So the way Canon did it was really interesting because it was sort of immersive audio in the sense that it wasn't David Attenborough, but it was somebody like that basically giving you all the information as you were floating across it.
Yeah,
So you not only did you get the visual impression, but also you got all the kind of data driven information about what was actually happening. Because I don't know anything about coral reefs, but I look at one and I go, that looks pretty, but I don't
yeah.
know. I don't really have the facts. So it was a really interesting experience. Of course, they're doing that because they're trying to, point attention towards the state of coral reefs. And it was very, it's good. It was good to see one of the major manufacturers actually getting involved in something like that. To be honest with you, that's the thing that impressed me the most. They're very fantastic printers and all the rest of it, but the thing that impressed me the most was that. Um, after all those years that you've been living in Iceland, and you've been photographing volcanoes and everything, um, is there an image you're still chasing?
Isn't there always? I think. I think
Yeah.
the the whole point of nature photography is like chasing a perfect moment that doesn't really exist. Like that's sort of the feeling that I get. But yeah, there's a lot that I still want to do. Like one of my dream shots is photographing narwhal. That's something that I would love to do at some point. Be here in Iceland, I think I would. Yeah, one of the things that I really want is a photograph of an eruption with a really big ash cloud where you have lightning in it.
Mm.
That's something that's really high on my list. Lava flowing into water of some kind, into the ocean. That's something that I would love to photograph at some point. There's so many things. I think that makes nature photography really interesting, is that you almost can't have it all, but you can sure try to get as close to that.
Exactly. Uh, if you could leave our listeners with one lesson that Iceland has taught you, um, about life and photography, what would that lesson be?
Hmm. Yeah, I think probably. Um, I think it's that you shouldn't set any expectations for yourself and just let things kind of come at you, because you're almost. And I find this all the time here. Is like, for example, last summer I set out to go and photograph a certain area that's really far away from a city. And I spent the night there because I wanted to have it under a certain light. So I spent 2 or 3 days on this single image that I wanted to do. And then the thing that was the best about it, the best image that I took on the entire trip, was not an image that I had planned. It was not the image that I managed to capture in the middle of the night in this remote area. It was a photo that I took when I was about 3 hours into my journey, and I took a little detour and I opened myself to, oh, okay, maybe something cool is happening there. And I captured this image, and that was sort of, yeah, that sort of teaches you exactly this, is that you should not have any expectations and always open yourself to anything. And that's when you will find you'll take the best photos, because planning and expecting certain results, it's almost guaranteed to disappoint you, which will demotivate you.
Absolutely. Okay, so we always finish with a quick fire round, 6 questions
Hmm.
in rapid succession. You ready?
Yep.
All right. Volcano or waterfall?
Volcano.
Summer sun or winter aurora?
Probably summer sun.
Um, Drone or camera on the ground?
Camera on the ground.
Cool. Okay. Highlands or Icelandic coastline?
Highlands.
Okay. If you could only use one lens for the rest of your life, what would that lens be?
100 to 500.
Cool. So it's interesting.
That's
Like people often comment on this podcast that we don't really very often get into the super 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 technical stuff,
yeah,
because I feel like like there's other podcasts that do that, So I don't really have to discuss f-stops on here necessarily. But that was the question that basically proves that we also do that.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
That 100 to 500, I've had it for 5 years and I use it for 90% of my images, I think.
yeah. It's a funny thing, depending on what you photograph, there's always like the one lens that's really on your camera like 85% of the time. In my case, it's 24 to 70 because I film a lot with it and I do a lot of stuff
Yeah,
with
yeah.
that. If you could photograph one thing in Iceland tomorrow that you've never photographed before, what would that be?
Probably that eruption with lightning.
Cool. I can see that in front of my mind's eye. That'd be cool.
Yeah, it's something I'm very jealous of, people who have that shot.
Jeroen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast this week. So thank you very much for being the guest on the Camera Check podcast this week.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
And there we are. We've come to the end of this week's Camera Check podcast. And if you'd like to learn more about Jeroen, see his incredible work, or find out about his workshops and adventures, be sure to check out the links in the description below. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform, and sharing this episode with a fellow photographer. It really does help, reach more people and continue bringing you these conversations each and every week. So don't forget, you can support the Camera Shake podcast over at buymeacoffee.com/Camera Shake. And you can now grab official Camera Shake merchandise at camerashakepodcast.com as well. So until next time, stay creative, stay safe, and keep shaking things up in the world of photography. And I'll see you next Thursday.